What's going on, boys? It is day number 25 of reading through the book of Acts. We are going to be picking up off of where we finished yesterday about Paul and his journey to going through these trials of claiming his defense and then having the Jews make their accusations to him. So for today, we're going to be looking at Paul's trial with a man named Festus. I think it's Festus, I think. I might be saying that wrong. So Festus is brought in to kind of have a conversation with Paul about the trial system. And so first, Festus brings in the accusers. He brings them in and allows the leaders of these of the Jews, which are the people who are against him, he allows them to come in and make their accusations about Paul and what they believe about him, what they think they should do with him. And so they do that, and so then Paul comes in. And so it says in verse 7, it says, when Paul came in, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him. They brought many serious charges against him, but they could not prove them. So those leaders who had come in before were making these accusations, but they didn't have any credential backup sources to essentially prove what they were saying was true. So, Paul comes in, and now it's his turn to speak. So, obviously we know that, Paul did not do anything wrong, but, there's many of these Jewish leaders who are fairly against what Paul has been doing and who he's been speaking to. And so Paul says in verse 8, he says, then Paul made his defense. I have done nothing wrong against the Jewish law or against the temple or against Caesar. So this is his defense, saying, oh, look, you guys have it all wrong. I haven't broken the law. I haven't gone against what the temple says or what Caesar said. I haven't gone against that. I have been abiding by the law. I have been speaking what God has put into my heart. I've been speaking what the Holy Spirit has been doing, and that's what I feel is right. That's not against the law. It's like, that's just how I roll, And so Festus kind of responds, with this kind of, demanding, response. He says in verse 9, he says, Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, he said to Paul, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there on these charges? And, we learn that from the previous chapters, I think it was chapter 23, that Paul was already in Jerusalem at one point. He was in Jerusalem, and it was a very violent area. So these riots that broke out. And so Paul, we can imagine that Paul is kind of, angered by that. And so he says in verse 10 through 12, he says, Paul answered, I am now standing before Caesar's court, where I ought to be tried. I have done nothing wrong to the Jews, as you yourself know very well. If, however, I am guilty of doing anything deserving death, I do not refuse to die. But if the charges brought against me by these Jews are not true, no one has the right to hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. After Festus had conferred with this council, he declared, you have appealed to Caesar. To Caesar you will go. So, Paul says again, he's like, I'm on this trial to proclaim my defense and proclaim that what I've done has not against what the law has said. He's like, if what I was done was against the law, then yes, that should deserve the proper consequences and proper actions that needed to take in play. And he's like, even if that means deserving death, he's like, I do not refuse to die. He's like, I'm not afraid to die. And, why is he not afraid to die? Well, because he has Christ. He has Christ in him. And when you have the Holy Spirit in him, you're not afraid to die. The only thing he fears is the Lord himself. He says, but, however, he's like, if these claims are true, which, and if what I'm saying is true, which we know it is true, he's like, it's not right to constantly put me in play with the Jews who are trying to be against me. He's like, I don't need to be put with them. And he doesn't have the right to be essentially kind of handed over like a dog with a leash to someone who's just going to yank him around all the time and not let him go out and do his thing. And so, he's like, look, he's like, this is how it's going to be. He's like, I want to speak with Caesar. And Caesar is the high emperor at the time, as we may know. Augustus Caesar, one of the most powerful emperors of Rome at the time. So he's like, look, I want to go speak with Caesar. I want to speak with him. He's the one that's, the high over the nation and everything. He's like, I want to speak with him. He said, because clearly what, these people are doing here is an unfair advantage. They're trying to, demote me of my power as much as they can. He's like, I'm not going to let that happen. So Festus is immediately kind of angered by this. And so he goes on, and Festus consults with King Agrippa, kind of telling him what exactly has happened with this man named Paul, about, what he has said and why he wants to go to Caesar. And Festus, his job is to kind of report to the high priest exactly what the actual claim is. He's kind of like that guy that's in, a courtroom who writes down the details and hands it to the judge, to where the judge can be like, okay, this is the court, this is the case today, this is what's being claimed, this is what's being defended. That's kind of his job. And so Festus doesn't really have anything to work with. He says in verse 20, he says, I was at a loss how to investigate such matters, so I asked if he would be willing to go to Jerusalem and stand before trial on these charges. But when Paul made his appeal to be held over for the emperor's decisions, I ordered him held until I could send him to Caesar. So he's like, yeah, he tells Agrippa, he's like, look, I couldn't, there was nothing I could really, use as, a backup statement. There's nothing I could really write down for what exactly is being argued here. And, when Paul made his claim, he's like, there was nothing I could do, and he wanted to see Caesar, so I felt that I was going to send him to Caesar. He's like, but I can't really send him to Caesar until I have something to work with. I can't send him to Caesar until I send a note ahead of time kind of saying what exactly, why he's coming, why exactly there's this argument. So Agrippa responds in verse 22. He says, then Agrippa said to Festus, I would like to hear this man myself. He replied, tomorrow you will hear him. And so, Agrippa's like, okay. He's like, well, maybe if I speak with this man, maybe there'll be something. So maybe there'll be something you can write down. Then he can be sent to Rome. And so this last little section to finish up the chapter is talking about the Festus and what exactly he's bringing up as his claim, and as Paul is brought in to the place where Agrippa is. And so I highlighted verses 25 through 27, and it says, I found he had done nothing deserving of death, but because he made his appeal to the emperor, I decided to send him to Rome. But I have nothing to write. I have nothing definite to write to his majesty about him. Therefore I have brought him before all of you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that as a result of this investigation, I may have something to write. For I think it is unreasonable to have send a prisoner to Rome without specifying the charges against him. So, he tells the people, he's like, look, I'm bringing Paul here today because I need something to write to Caesar. Ooh, excuse me. He's like, look, I need something to write to Caesar. I don't have anything. I tried speaking with him in the trials beforehand. There was nothing I could really get out of it. He's like, I'm hoping that when he speaks with Agrippa, there will be something that I can, write down to send over to Caesar, so that he can, kind of understand what exactly is happening here. And because like he said, it kind of does make sense a little bit, where he says, I found it kind of unreasonable to send a prisoner to Rome without specifying the charges. That'd be like, going to court today and not having accurate credential sources to defend your claim. If you say, well, I didn't do it, it's like, well, how do I know you didn't do it? So, if you have those, and again, Festus, even though he is against Paul here, it is very important that, if you're trying to get something across, that you have, credential sources and you have what you need to make your statement claim. But as we know, Paul has done nothing wrong. So, that's what makes it much harder for him to even get anything at all. So that's where the chapter ends off. So Chapter 26, we will learn about what exactly happens between this encounter of Paul and Agrippa. So I would say the overall kind of message for today is, multiple people, there's going to be various people in your life. They're going to come questioning you about your beliefs, your faith, your overall just kind of ways of living life. And even though they may question you about things that happen, and there's going to be a lot of questions they ask you that's going to be really kind of hard to answer. The most important thing is to stay calm and to answer with ease and to answer in a way that isn't necessarily trying to anger them, but you answer in a way to where it kind of questions them, make them think a little bit to whether or not what they're stating is actually, going to be beneficial. So again, be strong in your faith. Don't let one person throw you off just because they're, the total opposite of you. Because there's gonna be a number of enemies that are gonna try to use, something that you may have said in the past against you, or they're gonna try and make this claim that's not true, or they're gonna try and, just make up pretty much anything they can to throw you off. So just be aware of those obstacles in the road, and always speak the truth. Always speak from your heart. Always speak from what the Holy Spirit is telling you, because what the Holy Spirit tells you is right. Even if it seems, like hard at the beginning or hard during the process, it's going to pay off. I heard a great message, earlier today that, oftentimes when, we're looking, ahead, we tend to, forget that there's, big things in front of us that have to be taken care of first, and that, the worrying about things is very much what leads us to fall into sin, and what leads us to, not stay focused and to not stay on track. So, only focus on what's important to you. Only focus on what's directly in front of you, and only worry about what you control. If you can't control something, don't worry about it, because there's nothing you can do about it. And oftentimes when you worry about something, a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't happen. So if you're worried about, a certain person getting mad at you, or you're worried about, something, this certain event not happening, or something at work not happening, something at school, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to happen. If you're worrying about it consistently, it's probably not going to happen, So be calm, focus on what's directly in front of you. Other things will come into play. God knows your path. God knows what's going to happen. So if we trust Him, He will get us through anything He will get us through our lives. He will get us through any sort of hardships that we face on our daily basis. But that is the end of chapter 26. I hope you guys had a great day. Hope you guys have been enjoying the weather. And I hope to see you guys soon. Peace out, boys.